If you're thinking about producing a video for your club, this episode was made for you. We have been very fortunate and have produced a lot of videos in the past 20 years at StoryTeller. We have won some awards for our work. And I can tell you that when you have an opportunity to produce a high profile piece like a brand anthem video for the Olympic Club in San Francisco, the stakes definitely they get a little bit higher in those situations. And if you're in the club business, you probably know why. You know who the Olympic Club is and what a special club it is as well. So when we got the call to produce this video for them, we were all really, really excited. Steve Mulholland is our creative director at StoryTeller. He also is familiar with the Olympic Club and its place in history. He did all the heavy work with this thing and the heavy lifting with Christian Calabrese. I had very little to do with the project, but in this episode, Steve and I go back in time and just to talk about that project, what went into the piece and what really makes it so memorable. Here's my conversation with Steve Mulholland. You're listening to Crushing Club Marketing, a podcast for progressive club leaders ready to increase their club's revenue. Time for change begins right now. Well, Steve, thank you for indulging me with your presence in this episode.
Great to be here. Thanks, Ed.
I mean, not like it took a lot of arm twisting, but this is not, I think it's fair to say this is not your favorite thing to do, but thank you for doing it.
Oh, I'm happy to do it.
All right. So we're going to talk about the Olympic Club video in this episode. And it's a video that we produced for them 2023
2024.
2024 we produced this for them. So I remember when I heard that we had won this business and that we were going to produce a video for the Olympic Club. And I should say we have another client that's Olympic Hills in suburban Minneapolis. And yet the Olympic Club is such a different club. And I remember thinking like, my gosh, the Olympic Club in San Francisco and just, the history and it's hosted so many major events and is truly one of the iconic clubs in this country. What was your thought when we were like, hey, the Olympic Club wants to do a video?
Well, I immediately looked at it as an incredible opportunity, and when you're confronted with a great opportunity like that, there's the potential for doing something that's truly memorable. So I was really looking forward to it. Who doesn't love San Francisco? It's a place with two locations, one in downtown San Francisco, the historic clubhouse, and then of course the golf course out on the ocean. So I was really excited.
Yeah. So you've been involved with more large scale production than I have. I mean, when I say large scale, I mean, not just like the amount of gear and people and, sets and talent and things like that. But exposure where, if you make a mistake or something doesn't go right, you've been involved in way more projects than I have as it relates to exposure. For me, the Olympic Club was very much one of those pieces where it's like, boy, I hope we don't mess this one up. And not that I thought we would, but it's obviously very high profile. Do you get nervous about that kind of stuff? Or like, did that affect you at all? Like,
I get nervous about every shoot that we have or every project. I mean, it's like, you and I both have background in live television and what we're doing isn't live, but you really kind of only have one shot at it. You want to get it right the first time. You don't want to have to go back and reshoot anything. And, knock on wood, we haven't. But you have those jitters. You hear that, if you're not getting those jitters or if you're not excited or you're not a little bit nervous, then maybe you should find something else to do, because I think that's a good thing. It propels you forward. It gives you energy. It makes sure that you're focused. So, we went out to California to the Olympic Club, and we knew we had 3 days of filming, and we knew we had to be prepared, and we were prepared, and we had to get everything right and get everything that we needed so that we could create a memorable piece.
So let's talk about it really quickly. Just the scope of the piece was really, you could say it's promotional in that the Olympic Club wanted a piece that they could put on the website to basically introduce the club to people who were looking for information about the club, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Right,
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
Sorry.
I appreciate the
Yeah.
positive affirmation. So let's just talk through this for people who are listening who, maybe they have or have not produced a video before. The number you just said 3 days of filming. And um, I think it's fair to say that as producers, we will always take more time than less time, right? How does that change or how does that become more important with a project like this where we're traveling, right? We're hitting the road, we're picking out 3 days, but by having more time rather than just like say, oh, we're going to fly in for a day, get this done and get it out. Like why is it more important in these type of situations that have that cushion?
Well, things just really they take time. If you wanna do them right, if you set out a goal of what do we want this piece to look like? How do we want it to feel? What do we want the viewer to take from it? And, on a piece like the Olympic Club piece, we knew that the bar was high, so we wanted to do our very best work. We knew that there were 2 different locations, so, then they were a half an hour from one another. So that also came into play in terms of our planning. If it was all in one location, we might have been able to get it all done in 2 days, which is typically what we do for this type of video for a private club. But the fact is there were 2 very different locations. One that, sprawling golf course or golf courses, 3 courses, and then a downtown athletic club with a lot of amenities, a lot of features, a lot of things that we wanted to film. And we were doing interviews with key players from the Olympic Club. So, that was we knew that 3 days was probably our minimum. I mean, obviously, I would always love to do more, as you know, but you're working within budgets and all of that kind of thing. So, but 3 days in this case turned out to be the right amount. I think the piece came out looking really, really good. It really wasn't lacking anything, and so that was a good choice to do 3 as opposed to 2, which we've done before with other clubs with
Mhm.
similar videos.
How did you handle I was not as involved in the production and you were the lead on this, but how did you determine the messaging? Like how does that and typically we like to come up with the messaging first so we really know. I mean, it sort of sets the tone and sets the stage for everything. Like what are we trying to say? But how did you what was your that experience like, and what did you do to really nail down some of like what should you say? Because there's so much to talk about as it relates to the Olympic Club, and I know a lot of times people like to talk about like, oh, we hosted this major and we did this and we did this and we have this, but that's not really what this piece is.
No, it's not. And in terms of the messaging, we knew what we wanted the piece to feel like. We knew that we wanted it to be big in scope. We knew that Olympic Club had a rich history with U.S. Open championships, and the clubhouse in downtown San Francisco was built in 1911. The original one was burned in the Great Fire of San Francisco. So there's history there. So we wanted to tell a story about the history, but it's also, it's a modern club. It's people that live in 2026 that are, coming to the club and enjoying membership there. So we wanted to tell those stories too. But so in terms of messaging, we relied on interviews, which is kind of what we do. It goes back to our background as journalists, um, doing unscripted storytelling. So, but I think we were really what we did. We were smart in who we chose to talk with. Their general manager, their CEO, was very eloquent in being able to share the message of what the Olympic Club means to members, its place in San Francisco, its place in history, all of those things, and he was great. I mean, he really articulated the message well. And then we did interviews with some members who were really passionate about the club and who really conveyed that message of it's a home away from home. And you hear that a lot, and we hear that a lot from our clubs, but it's really true. Particularly a club that is in the middle of a big city. A lot of members kind of think of it as an extension of home, and we got that message from them, but also we need to show that. So it's documenting spaces within the club, the amenities within the club to show that message of, this really is a home away from home.
Yeah.
And then, of course, when you think of golf and when you think of California, your mind goes to the ocean views on the Pacific, and that's exactly what the Olympic Club has. So, we filmed out on the ocean course, and the lakes. I believe it's the lakes course, the other course that they have, and then there's a par 3 course as well. But to capture that imagery as well. So it's the message. There's several messages that were part of the whole strategy. One, the big one is, it's your home within San Francisco. It's feeling like you belong to this club. There's also the history component, that it has such a rich history, and I think our interviews with our key players in the video really helped capture all that.
Yeah, and it's I want to come back to the interviews and how, how you settled on the people, or what the thinking was behind the various people that were interviewed, in a second. But it was almost like, honestly, there are some standout sound bites, but it seems like you just created a feel for the piece that left you might not even remember what was all said, but you're like, at the end, you almost feel the pride that the members speak about. You know what I mean?
Uh-huh.
I mean, and so you said something that I just want to emphasize as well. We talk to a lot of private clubs around the country, and they almost always say the same thing, is that this is their home away from home. They get here and they exhale. And yet at the Olympic Club might feel very different than another club, even in San Francisco, let alone, in Florida or South Carolina or whatever. But your ability to bring that to life, like what home means at the Olympic Club, is something that it seemed like, from a vibe perspective, that is something that you focused in on and nailed. I mean, is that an intentional thing? Like, or do you just, does it just sort of just like, make itself known as you're going through the shoot? It's like, oh, this is what it feels like. I mean, how does that, because you've never been there before. So how do you know until you really get there and you start to really experience that?
Yeah, you're right. We didn't really know. We did our research and we had conversations with them, but we didn't really know. And there's a certain sense of discovery when you're doing unscripted storytelling, and I think you can use that to your advantage, because you need to be curious. You need to see the club in a way that even maybe the members don't see it. To seek out details, when you're seeing things for the first time, you notice more. You're impressed by more things that maybe some people take for granted, that but in terms of, the Olympic Club specifically, and kind of capturing that home away from home feel. One thing that we kind of realized is, like, these members are coming in, particularly to the city clubhouse. That really is their home away from home. A lot of them are young people. They're living in small studio apartments, but the Olympic Club is kind of a social experience for them. But it's also like an extension of their home. They're living in a small apartment, but they come to the Olympic Club, and it's like their living room. It's like their kitchen, where they get their coffee in the morning and they get their workout in and they get their shower and they get off to work. It's part of their day. So, capturing their enthusiasm for that was a component in the story, and it really showcased the club well. And so I guess, getting back to your original question, though, there is this sort of sense of discovery when you're going into a situation. You want to tell a story, and you don't know all the answers, but you're going to find them out. And that process of finding out those answers really is part of the story. So
Mhm.
that worked out
Yeah.
well for us.
Yeah, so it does sort of reveal itself in that way. What I find interesting is that there weren't a lot of interview subjects in it, right? You've got the GM, and I just, and what I always think of, and I show my age, but everyone just seems so young, or the members that you interviewed seem younger. Um, I guess, two things, like, how did you select those people, or how were they selected? And then the second thing I'm kind of curious about is, and I'll just say it, a lot of times people, when we're doing projects like this, they think they need to have like 10 different people being interviewed. And sometimes you have 3 or 4 of the right people, and it can really carry the story. So maybe if you could just like your take on that and how these people were able to, and the fact, how were they selected, and was it because they could sort of carry some of the story for a number of people?
Mhm. Well, we had conversations with our clients at the Olympic Club about who would be best to articulate the message, and so we did rely on them for that. You know, we said that hey, we want some members who are really enthusiastic about the Olympic Club, that reflect the demographic, and it did skew a little bit younger. You know, people in their 20s and 30s. We spoke with, as I mentioned, the GM, uh, who was great, and then also the director of fitness who was able to speak to, you know, the amenities of the club and kind of in the culture and what they try to do for members. So you're right. I mean, it's four four speakers, four participants for a video that you're kind of targeting to be about 4 minutes is about right. You
Mhm.
know, if you try to you know, pack too many voices into a piece like that, it's gonna bloat.
Mhm.
You know, we've seen that before.
Wait,
You
what do you
want
mean that you say? I mean, that conjures up a great image
Mhm.
of bloating, but what do you like? What does that feel like as a viewer when if a piece is bloated?
Well, you know, it might start to feel redundant. It might start to feel just a little bit long. You know, it
Mhm.
doesn't. You don't need to have five people telling you the same message over
Mhm.
and over, you know? So, trying to pack too many people into a video that's trying to tell a story of a place like the Olympic Club, you don't need to have, more than 4 or 5 participants to tell
Mhm.
that story, at least you shouldn't have to.
Right.
If
It's
you
it
if you you
Yeah.
know, unless if it's a longer format piece, I mean, obviously, if it's a half hour of television, which is, you know, 22 and a half minutes trimmed down after commercials,
Right.
you're gonna probably want more voices to you know, you're gonna have a deeper story that's gonna go down some roads that you wouldn't really have time to explore in a 4 to 5 minute piece.
Right. And that's such an interesting thing for people that, again, like whether you're thinking about producing a video or you would like to, um, there are two things that converge, which is the duration. It's like, oh, we want this to be, we'll hear the slot 2 minutes, 3 minutes, and then they'll have 8 people that they want in the piece. And it's, unless you have you're going to approach it in a very distinct way where you're going to cram 8 people in with really short sound bites and, whatever is really difficult to do. But the other thing that I think that our clients understand is once you get into the process and you start to think about the messaging and the sound bites, it's very difficult in some cases for a piece like this. And we've done some others, done a lot through the years, but where it becomes very difficult to do a 2 minute piece and have a bunch of different people and also provide the depth that I think a lot of, in this case, clubs want to be able to talk about and share about their club. So just a more, I guess, a note to those would-be producers.
Yeah. It's kind of like math, you know, it's kinda simple math. Imagine if you have 10 voices in a 2-minute piece. How are you gonna construct a story? It's almost like they're gonna have to finish each other's sentences or something, you know?
Yeah.
It's gonna be disjointed. If you have a 2-minute piece focused on one person and you explore that story, that's gonna be more compelling. You know, if you think about really compelling news stories, um,
Mhm.
you know, somebody that you and I both love is, Steve Hartman on CBS News. His stories are usually about one person, and
Right.
it's a, you know, a 2-minute piece, and um, it's you can tell a story that way. If his stories were about, you know, 10 people in a 3-minute story, it would be, overwhelming for the viewer, so and very difficult to do.
Right. That's one of my favorite things too. I used to tell the story we did early on in my when I was first starting StoryTeller in the early 2000s. Uh, we were producing a video for a nonprofit, a well-known national nonprofit, and I won't mention who they are, but they wanted to tell the story of 5 families, and have them all really, because there are 5 different families that they helped in different ways and everything. And I'm like, you're gonna lose them, and because you start forgetting who goes with who. It's like, oh, wait, is he with? Oh, he has that kid. Wait, is that, and you lose all the impact because you spend most of the time in the piece trying to figure out what's going on more than anything. But
Yeah.
can we talk about just stylistically how you approach this piece? Because it's one of those things that a lot of times as a viewer, it's easy to watch a piece and at the end go, oh, that was really good. But when you start putting together all the elements that go into making it really good, and that's kind of maybe what I was saying earlier about like how it makes you feel. But the visuals, the audio, everything that goes into it, but starting with how the interviews were filmed, um, the 2 cameras, right? Could you just talk about, like, there's the one shot where the interview subject is looking right into the lens, and then another shot that's secondary, the B camera, if you will, that's getting like an offset shot. Could you just kind of walk our listeners through why it's done that way and why it's so effective?
Sure. You know, if budget allows, we like to film with 2 cameras. As you mentioned, the first camera, I've been doing this style of interviewing for over 20 years, and it's very effective. It's very compelling. It involves a device in which the person being interviewed is looking directly into the barrel of the lens, but they're seeing the reflection of the interviewer. So they're actually talking to a person, just like I'm talking to you right now. So instead of looking off axis, they're looking right into the lens. They're speaking right to the viewer, and it's extremely engaging. It also is great for frame composition. It allows you to set a frame that looks cinematic. We like to go a little bit wider to show a sense of the space when on what we call it the A camera, with the person speaking direct to the lens. We try to create kind of a vignette, and we put a lot of time into it, and it does take time to make it look and feel cinematic. The B camera is, it's kind of got 2 functions. One is it allows us to cut to a different camera in case we need to edit an interview soundbite down. Sometimes we'll cover that with B-roll imagery, but sometimes we want to keep the person on camera, but we want to make an edit in what they're saying, just to economize what they're saying, or to make the soundbite more clear, whatever it is. So it allows us to do that. We can cut from the A camera over to the B camera, and we're taking out a piece of what they're saying, but it's still keeping it within context.
Mhm.
The other thing is that camera does is it's a little bit more voyeuristic. It is the
The B
traditional
camera.
the B camera. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Yes, thanks. The B camera is a little bit more voyeuristic because you're looking at it from the off axis. The person that's being interviewed isn't looking directly at you, but you're looking at them. So just stylistically, it creates a more interesting experience for the viewer. It makes the piece more compelling. It gives us more options in edit, and it's definitely worth the trouble, the expense, which is minimal, to have both cameras, and then also have the iDirect device for the A camera, so that the person being interviewed can look directly at the audience.
Helpful. So you use cinematic as a term, and I just want to understand the difference. Like for someone to say, I just think about people. It's like, oh, we don't need it to look like a movie, or it doesn't need to. It's going to cost how much, whatever. And they might hear cinematic. They're like, well, maybe if it wasn't cinematic. But anyway, I guess my point is, when you talk about that cinematic effect, how much of that has to do with like the camera, the lens, the framing, could you help just shed a little light on? I know we're getting into some minutia here, but I
Sure.
am kind of curious from a how you think of that.
Well, broadly speaking, it's a lot easier to achieve a cinematic look in 2026 than it was in 1996. Uh, 30 years ago, you would have to invest in film cameras, film processing, all of those things. We've come light years since then. So, but when we say cinematic, really our goal is always to make our images look as good as they can. We
Mhm,
want people to watch a piece like the Olympic Club and say to themselves, "Wow, that's beautiful. I wanna go there. I wanna find out more about this place." So, to achieve that, it's a matter of using the right cameras, which are, thankfully now they're very affordable. So when we work with our videographers, they're partnering with us for that shoot. The cost is nominal. It's not gonna break the bank.
mhm,
They've got great lenses. Lenses are key. Lenses are one of the most important thing because they really, interpolate the image that you're filming and put it in various context, whether it's a shallow depth of field or a sharpness or a wide angle, to create different kinds of feels. So, that's all part of the package.
mhm,
Lighting is another thing that we take great pains with, particularly with our interviews.
mhm,
Our storytellers are our participants. They're the ones helping us tell the story. So we want them to look as good as they possibly can. So again, that's sort of the cinematic feel. How are you framing the shot? How are you lighting the shot? How do they look in the frame? Which direction are they looking when they're speaking? All of those things go toward trying to create a cinematic look.
mhm.
When we film B-roll, which is just the footage that helps tell the visual story, we, like to film in slow motion. So uh, we do that almost exclusively unless we've got other, if unless we're maybe shooting, we want to pick up sound and we want natural sound to go with the visuals. Then we'll shoot in real time speed. But a lot of times with our B-roll, we like to create drama and create beauty with going in slow mo. We use a device called a Ronin gimbal, which allows us to get a steady cam footage. So, you watch films with these big, long moving shots that weave their way through hallways and out windows and all of that kind of thing. That's usually done with some kind of either a drone or a Ronin gimbal, as I mentioned. The Ronin gimbal is easy. It's this great device that allows our camera person or videographer to move his camera around, just carrying it himself, but smooths out all of the bumps, gives us really steady shots, which translate into great visuals in the finished piece. So
Yeah.
all of those things go toward our goal of trying to make our video product look as cinematic as possible.
Right. Yeah, and you can see the gimbal in a lot of the shots in the Olympic Club piece. I mean, it's, I think up and down the driving range and that movement. And so much of it is just engaging the audience in their brain and keeping the shots varied and which
Mhm.
is really a discipline in itself as well. Can you
One
talk
thing
about the
about
yeah.
sorry, Ed, just one thing about the B-roll at the Olympic Club. The gimbal came in great at the city clubhouse, but out on the ocean course when we were filming, we do like to film drone, particularly with golf courses. We didn't use a drone for this; it wasn't in the budget, but we did use the Ronin on a golf cart, and so we were
Oh,
driving
cool.
around on a golf cart getting shots, and the Ronin gimbal allowed us to get these steady moving shots through the golf course, coming up to the clubhouse, looking out over the ocean. So it was really effective in that way.
Yeah. It's so let's kind of tie it back, maybe as we think about the cinematic feel, from so much that goes into it. But you are, I'm just admire the way your sense for music. And anyone who's watched a lot of, like, say, corporate videos, and I mean, that used to be one of the things when we had licenses to some of the music services, especially in the early days, some of the music was really limited. You think about the early 2000s and, early 2010s, and there weren't a lot of great music libraries available. But even so, um, Well, could you just talk about your sense for music? Because I think when you think about everything that you're saying about cinematic and making things, how you make things look, you have a belief about music and just, how to select it. Would you share that?
Sure. Well, we do have a great music library that we source our music from. I will say it's a really good one. I've worked with a lot of them over the years, and it's got a great interface so that you can search through lots of different cuts and try to find stuff that you need to find, and using keywords and how you want the music to sound or feel. So that's really effective. My big number one rule with music is don't sell your project short. I think that in other words, don't think that because it's a video about an HR firm or an insurance company or whatever, that you need to find some kind of corporate sounding music to go with that. You want to music is really heightens the emotion. It really influences how the viewer is going to feel, how they're going to interpret the images. It can make such a difference. So don't sell your message short. Select music that you might think is a little too lofty for your message, because your message is gonna rise up with that music. It's gonna lift your message up. So that's kind of my goal, is just to really kind of um, don't undersell what your message is, and
Yeah.
make sure that you're choosing music to really support that.
As someone who has selected music for pieces in the past, I think the easy way to think of it is sometimes if you're as a producer and you're listening to different cuts and it's like you're trying to match a mood. I'm trying to, there's a, I think a good correlation here. Well, actually, it's really unrelatable. But in TV news, they used to say, I remember I had someone tell me one time, they said, when you are anchoring a sportscast, you have to have twice with video, you have to have twice the enthusiasm to get half of that response. So if you come off, it's just yourself, like, hey, I'm just going to talk like me, then it's like you have 50% of that energy. But music is kind of the same way in that regard, right? I mean, it's like some of the cuts of music that you have used, what in Olympic Club is absolutely one of them. I remember the first time I saw it, I'm like, oh my gosh. It sort of like surprises you how big and cinematic it feels. And you think, wow, for this little video, but man, it works. And to your point, it elevates the entire piece because everything goes with it. But don't you agree that that's only matched with the shots that you're using, how you've lit the interviews, what they're saying, like all those things, the graphics, like everything. If you have all those elements, then the music, I mean, that's when it all works, right? Because if you have crappy interview setups and the lighting's horrible, then it just looks like, why are they using that music? That seems, inappropriate.
Right. I mean, you do need both. You can't have one without the other. But it's always interesting, if you see some kind of some piece that you really think is effective, it's got great music, it's got great visuals, turn the sound down and watch it
Mm,
and see what that experience is like. Or, you know, turn the picture off, or look away from the picture and listen to it. You know,
yeah.
it's a different experience, obviously, but it really sort of underscores the impact that music has, especially. Um, and you're right. You do need to have, you have to have you have to reach a certain level with your visuals to kind of help partner with the right music. If you were to put, you know, I'm trying to think. I can't think of the composer, but like a Gershwin piece to a news story about you know a crime in your city or something like that. It's not a match,
Right.
obviously.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Yeah.
But if you're going about trying to craft your video and your message the right way, and you're really putting a focus on making it look as good as it possibly can, don't sell it short. pick music that's really gonna help elevate it because and overshoot a bit, you know? That music, your story, your visuals, if they're done right, can hold up with a really stirring, emotional, dramatic, whatever it is, piece of music
Mhm.
that you wanna use.
How much
And I
how
think
much
that's a great thing about the Olympic Club is, you know, the music is really some really good cuts of music, and, they worked well with, the visuals that we had.
Mhm. How much editing of sound do you and you're not you're working with an editor, but when you're going through the details of the piece, how much time do you spend in, like, going through the sound? Because a lot of these interviews, you still have music going underneath, and, and that has to be the right cut too. But do you spend a lot of time in post just going through, like, the details of the audio?
Well, I we work with an editor, who I've worked with for decades, and I really trust him, and I usually don't have to give him a lot of notes on that. But when you are watching it back and you wanna make sure that everything is that you can hear everything that's being spoken. Um, there are times when you want a certain chord to hit on with a certain shot, and that's something that you need to communicate with your editor or your audio mixer.
Mhm.
I've worked on projects in the past where we would spend 40 to 60 hours mixing a show,
Yeah.
an hour television. So, we don't do that typically with our pieces, but there is a lot of attention, paid to making sure that the music fits with the picture, that it's hitting the right notes at the right times based on what you're seeing. And, it also what we like to do with our pieces is use music and changing the music from one score to another to signal a change in message. If it's a different section of the video, we wanna start with a new piece of music. It helps pace the piece. It helps it keeps moving it along. If you have one cut of music over 4 minutes,
Yeah.
that's gonna seem long. The piece is gonna start to feel long. Whereas
Right.
if you have maybe 2 or 3 cuts of music over that same span, it's gonna feel like that piece is moving forward and moving, in a way that you want it to, so,
Yeah.
that's always key too. Music is huge with the pacing.
Yeah. Um, this is great. I'll give you a second to think. But I'll tell you what the question is, and I'll blather on for a couple seconds, then I'll come back to your answer.
That sounds like a good idea.
I'm going to ask you what do you think are the most memorable parts of the Olympic Club video? But and then what I'm gonna blather on about is that, what you realize over time, and especially today, there's so many talented photographers. There's so much equipment out there that's available for consumers, that can do whether it's drones or whether it's gimbals for your phone. There's a lot of great technology out there. The Bluetooth microphones that you're seeing all over the place, the reporters using in news, and so there's a lot of great technology out there that enables people to produce their own video content. And this is just probably my own little self plug or plug for our work and what we do. But I always tell people that producing great videos is not about the equipment, and it's not about someone who knows how to use, like, who knows how to pick stuff up and put it in, import it into an editing tool. It's a lot of what you're talking about. I mean, if you want something that's truly memorable, that's really big, it's about someone who understands the aesthetic and the right environment for certain things and how to bring it up, put it all together and bring it to life. And that's the one thing that in the videos that I see, not there's so much great stuff out there today, but those are the things that I look for when I'm watching someone else's work, is seeing how well they're able to pull all those pieces together to make it work. So often there's a soundbite that's too long, or why did they cut that? Why did they, um, but don't you think, I mean, so much of it is just in those details, and I would say it's like in the editing, in some ways, but that's just me blathering. But what are your thoughts on my blathering?
Mm, well, it's interesting you mentioned that, just kinda watching things with a sort of critical eye. Um there are times when I'm watching stuff and it might be really good, or it might be it's distracting because, like you said, it might have weird edits. Like, why did they make that choice? But then, if I'm watching something that's truly, really a great piece of content, I get distracted by like, wow, this looks like it was a lot of work. How did they do that?
Mhm.
If you watch a movie, a lot of times movies, I'm thinking about how much work it is,
Yeah.
but, but anyways, but to your earlier point about, equipment that is available to the average person now, it does open up a lot more opportunities for anyone to create their own stories or create their own content. We've got people on our staff that are really skilled at, finding new software platforms and editing tools and things like that, and I'm just amazed by what they're doing with it. So, there are a lot more opportunities for that now than there ever was, that's for sure.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so what's your favorite part, or what do you think about, like, is your favorite parts of the Olympic Club piece in relation
Uh,
to all that we're talking about?
yeah, okay. I mean, I just love that part of the country. I love the San Francisco Bay, the Pacific Ocean, the ride down to Monterey. So I love the shots of the, ocean course and the clubhouse. They help sort of, share the scope of the Olympic Club, and it's two very different sort of styles. Out on the ocean course, there's the big open views, beautiful golf course holes, the ocean, etc. And then you're in the city and you're in this 120-year-old building that's just gorgeous.
Mhm.
And I loved there's this pool there that's I think it's original to the building with the Italian tile and marble and these giant columns that goes up 2 stories, with this big beautiful ceiling, and it was really fun filming in there because we were just able to get a lot of great shots. It looked like just almost like a throwback to a 1930s film or something. It was very, very cool.
Mhm.
They've got a rooftop gymnasium with views of the city. That was a really great place to film. Um, you know, uh, just a number of things, and just finer details too. In that city clubhouse, the lobby, the private rooms, the guest rooms.
Mhm.
Just making that come to life
Mhm.
was a lot of fun, and those are some of my favorite sort of visuals from the piece.
Mhm.
Um,
It's
and
like
I also
everything.
yeah, but also the interview that we did with the GM, he was really great about articulating, what the Olympic Club means, its place in history, and he spoke with such, um, authentic passion for the place. It really helped sort of narrate the piece, really. He set the tone for that, and it was great having him in the piece.
Whenever I think of the Olympic Club piece, I think about the opening montage and the sound, the music with it, and it pulls you in right away. And I think that's one of your gifts, and you do that with a lot of your pieces, is in those first, 15 to 30 seconds, you're like locked in. The visual, the movement of the shots. I mean, that's what really got me. I love the interviews. The lighting of all the interviews is what you're saying earlier. I think is just they all look great, but for sure, the general manager interview, the setting for that with the backdrop, is spectacular. But what I think also makes that work is his confidence. And that also set the tone for who the Olympic Club is. And so those are the things, at least to me, that when I think of that piece, I think of those elements that make me say, wow, that was a memorable piece. But watching it, again and viewing it, it's amazing how much movement there is in that piece. Every shot is moving, it seems like, and it gives you this sort of active feel to the whole piece um that just works so well too.
Mhm. Yeah. I do need to give credit to, our videographer, Christian Calabrese. who got those shots. He worked tirelessly to get them. And he's got such a great eye for detail as well. I like to sometimes just say, "Hey, Christian, you know, let's cover this room," and he'll go about it and see things that you might not normally see and make them look spectacular. And then, you mentioned the opening sequence. I mean, that our editor, Pete Keffer, is great at bringing shots together and combining shots to create that feel. So the two of them really were instrumental in this piece and did a great job.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, hey, thanks for taking us behind the scenes here. It's always fun I think it's fun for us just to talk shop, even if no one ever listens to this. At least it's fun for us too.
Yeah, it is. It's fun. It's our passion and we love it. And looking forward to the next one.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, Steve.
Okay, thanks, Ed.
Thank you for listening. If you find episodes like this helpful, be sure to share it and subscribe on whatever podcast platform you're using. Until next time, keep crushing your club marketing.